Diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, has been a point of contention in both the public and private sectors for years. While it's designed to create a more just society, there are some serious concerns about its funding, its programs, and its impact. Today, we'll dive into the misuses of DEI funding, the controversies surrounding it, and the arguments for and against its existence. Stay tuned, because by the end, you might be left wondering if the whole thing is as straightforward as it seems. Now, where did DEI come from? The concept itself evolved over time as the civil rights movement gained traction in the mid-20th century. Before DEI, the focus was largely on civil rights. But by the 1980s and 1990s, companies and governments began to realize that diversity wasn't just about hiring people from different groups. It was about creating systemic change that would support everyone, especially those who had been marginalized. Diversity initiatives were initially part of affirmative action programs, which were set up by the government in the 1960s and 1970s to address racial discrimination in the workplace and schools. These programs aimed to increase the number of minorities in institutions that had historically excluded them. Over time, this idea expanded to cover not just race, but also gender, sexual orientation, and inclusivity for LGBTQ+ individuals, giving rise to what we now know as DEI. Unlike affirmative action programs, which are rooted in anti-discrimination law, DEI programs are not. Participation is not mandatory. Programs are administered in both public and private sectors, including government agencies, schools, and corporations. In government settings, such as schools or federal organizations, there are departments or offices dedicated specifically to DEI, which implement policies, provide training, and sometimes monitor compliance. The funding for DEI typically comes from either federal or state budgets, or, in private sectors, from company resources. The funding can be direct, like grants or specific allocations in government budgets, or indirect, like tax incentives for companies that promote DEI practices. It can also come from private organizations or nonprofits that work with local governments to further these goals. Let's start by addressing some of the alleged misuses of DEI funding. Critics argue that billions of taxpayer dollars earmarked for DEI are being misallocated. For instance, some claim that money is being used for programs that don't lead to tangible results. A common criticism is that large corporations and government agencies have been using DEI funds to create bureaucratic layers, hiring diversity officers, consultants, and implementing mandatory training that some argue have little real-world impact. For example, diversity training programs have been cited as a way to check the box on inclusion without actually fostering long-term change. Additionally, there are accusations that DEI funds have been used for programs that promote division rather than unity, particularly when some training focuses on identity politics, which critics argue can alienate employees rather than bring them together. Some programs funded by DEI have become lightning rods for controversy. One example is the push for anti-racism workshops in schools and workplaces, which critics say can sometimes veer into the realm of ideological indoctrination rather than constructive dialogue. Others point to the funding of initiatives that prioritize hiring quotas or preferences, which some feel unfairly favor certain groups over others. Additionally, some question the effectiveness of university diversity programs that promote certain student groups at the expense of others. Critics argue that this leads to a sense of entitlement or resentment rather than true inclusivity. Now, let's not overlook the fact that DEI also funds some critical programs aimed at breaking down long-standing barriers. These include scholarships and educational outreach aimed at underrepresented groups, mentorship initiatives for minority students, and accessibility programs for individuals with disabilities. Programs like these are undeniably important for helping level the playing field in education and employment. These are programs that, by most accounts, are crucial for ensuring that everyone has an equal shot at success, regardless of their background. But even these efforts have sparked debate. mainly about whether they're enough or if the system needs a broader overhaul. So, how much money is actually being dispensed each year for DEI programs? Estimates suggest that billions of dollars are spent annually, $2.6 billion in federal DEI spending alone in recent years. The funds go to a range of institutions, including government agencies, schools, universities, and corporations that meet specific diversity benchmarks. But with all that money on the table, what exactly is expected of the institutions receiving DEI funding? In return for the funding, institutions are typically required to set measurable diversity goals, conduct regular audits, and implement inclusive hiring practices. They must also create an environment that actively includes marginalized groups, with penalties in place for non-compliance. So, are there any programs already addressing the same issues as DEI? Yes, you've got the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, the Civil Rights Act, and programs like affirmative action that aim to reduce discrimination based on race, gender, or other protected statuses. But unlike DEI, which includes broader ideas like equity and inclusion, these programs focus more narrowly on specific discriminatory practices. Now, let's get into some politics. President Donald Trump made headlines when he sought to dismantle federal DEI programs during his first term in office. Trump argued that DEI initiatives were divisive and that they promoted critical race theory, an academic framework some claim is teaching that American society is inherently racist. He said that the government should not be spending money on these programs because they, in his words, were un-American. He believed that these efforts created unnecessary tension and resentment among Americans. Today, he has implemented executive orders to dismantle the program. Trump supporters argue that dismantling DEI is about fostering unity, not division. While Trump's reasons for wanting to eliminate DEI programs are clear, many critics believe there may be ulterior motives. Some argue that his stance is less about addressing the root causes of inequality and more about maintaining the status quo, where power and privilege remain in the hands of a few. By defunding or dismantling DEI, they claim Trump and his allies might be protecting institutional structures that benefit them and their supporters. Others suggest that Trump's position is also a way to rally a segment of the electorate who feel that their traditional values are under attack by a more progressive movement. In short, some see his opposition to DEI as a tool to consolidate political power. So here we are. On the one hand, DEI programs undoubtedly support critical initiatives that can help build a more fair and inclusive society. On the other hand, there are concerns about how the funds are used, the programs that get funded, and the ideological battles surrounding it. While the intention behind DEI is to create a more just world, the reality is far more complex and controversial. In the end, the debate over DEI isn't just about policies, it's about what kind of society we want to create. So whether you're a supporter or a critic, the question remains, are these programs helping or are they fueling division? And what does that mean for the future of America? What do you think about DEI? Should it be reformed, defunded, or even dismantled? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos that tackle the issues that matter.